Okay, so I attempted to do a video on Leave It yesterday with Carl. The problem with it is the lighting is one of the problems. And the lighting, the angle. But no room in the house is going to be quiet enough or clean enough to be happy with it. In addition to those other aspects. So let me talk about what I'm doing there, and then let me see if I can. Let me see if I can expound, elaborate upon what I had planned there. So, if you're working on Leave It, a good place to start is going to be finding yourself a nice right angle in your house. So go find where a wall meets another wall, or like a counter, a table, whatever. You're looking for a right angle. You're looking for a corner. I start off by using kibble. So pieces of kibble. I'm going to place it in that right angle. And for dogs that have not exhibited resource guarding over food, then you can you can conduct this relatively safely. If your dog has exhibited resource guarding or possessive aggression over food, or you're not sure, then I would not do this, okay? Because what's going to happen is I'm going to put, if every time my dog tries to go forward to, when they're curious about the kibble on the floor, I'm going to move my foot over the top of the kibble, or I'm going to move my body between my dog and the kibble. So this is not something that I would recommend if your dog doesn't have a good track record with food, okay? So the reason why I start off with kibble is because I don't want to be using actual foreign objects or something that, like, I wouldn't want my dog to be able, I wouldn't want my dog getting a hold of. I'm not going to use that for practice. I'm going to use something in case they get it. It's not going to be the end of the world. So kibble makes sense there. But just keep in mind that the kibble that we're putting on the ground is going to be operating with the same contingencies as an actual Leave It item. Okay, so I don't ask my dog to leave it and then reward my dog with that same item, because you wouldn't do that with a grape or an onion, or like a pit from a fruit. You wouldn't do that with chocolate. You wouldn't do that with a cigarette, you know. So you're gonna practice the same way. Like, that kibble is a Leave It item, so you're not gonna reward them with that piece of kibble. You can pick that kibble up and put it back in your pocket or your pouch, and then put it in rotation as a reward, like as a food reinforcer. But you're not gonna let them get it. You're not gonna let them acquire it from the ground. So Leave It generally, to touch on that for to touch on this for a second, Leave It is generally not used for things that you're going to eventually permit your dog to have. So Leave It's not good to use with toys that you are going to eventually let your dog have. It's not good for the food bowl, because you're eventually going to give them access to that. It's going to be good for things that are generally off limits. But so you want to consider using like a weight cue instead, like, so you can release your dog to go get the toy that you threw. If you're having them like practice impulse control or whatever, for throwing a ball or releasing them to go eat their food out of the food bowl. So all that is to say, don't use Leave It for something you're eventually going to give to your dog. Use a weight instead. So with this right angle, what I do, like I said, I put the kibble in the corner, I put it in the right angle. You can ask your dog to leave it once, but don't plan on that being effective. As usual, I don't like to give a cue more than once, maybe twice if it's really urgent, but after that, you're going to have to facilitate it. But plan on your dog getting curious and trying to acquire that kibble, that piece of kibble, or those pieces of kibble. And then, like I said, what I do is I will put my body in between them and the kibble, or I'll put my foot over the kibble to prevent them from just grabbing it. And then when they back off to any extent, it just kind of depends on where the dog is. Like if the dog backs off but is still looking at that area, you can count that. If the dog backs off and looks anywhere but at that thing, then you can count that certainly. If your dog backs off and then looks at you, then like that's gold, that's gravy. All right, but like a lot of people are just hell-bent on getting that eye contact. Where you need to start is looking anywhere on the clock face but at the leave it item. Okay, so what I do typically with a lot of things is like I will label the behavior when it is successfully when it's fulfilled. Like when the behavior, when it successfully occurs, when it comes to fruition, then I will label it. So like when the dog looks at the kibble and they're not extending their snout forward to grab it, when they're not bending their head down and trying to grab it, and they're just simply looking at it, guess what? That's a leave it. So I'll click leave it, and then I'll give them a food reinforcer from my pouch or my pocket or whatever. And then when they look at it and then they look elsewhere, like that's when you would click if you're using a clicker, and then I would simultaneously say leave it and then give them a food reinforcer, right? So that's the first version. That's where I started, is I use this right angle. And again, you need to use any data that you have, any data that maybe potentially you don't have, to decide whether your dog's going to be like a good fit for this exercise, because you don't want your dog like biting your foot. Okay. So the next version is going to be moving out away from that corner and putting the food on the ground in the open, but still giving yourself enough space, like proximity to it and reaction time, to be able to do the same thing that you were doing with the corner, just out in the open. Generally don't wait for your dog to pursue it. Like somewhere in your brain, you want your dog to do it so you can interrupt them from doing it, so you can correct them. Like that's not what we want. If your dog is looking at it and they're not trying to go for it, capture that now. Capture that right there, and then tell them that they're doing a good leave it. That's a great job. So then the next version would be dropping the piece of kibble, like probably from I don't know, your knee. Start low. The higher it is, especially with a consistency of a kibble, it's going to bounce. So you really can't necessarily account for where that's going to bounce. So you might need to switch treat types to something softer that's going to just be dead when it hits the floor. Or you're going to need to be quick. You're going to need to be anticipating and moving. And again, don't do this version if you suspect that your dog may contest the food, in a physical way. If they're going to use their mouth, and they're not going to have good bite inhibition, or they're going to bite you over the food, then don't do this version of it. So the other version is what I have to do when I'm out on a walk, or at least in part. So have your dog on leash and put the food outside of the slack that is afforded by the leash. So put the kibble on the ground at a distance where your dog's not able to physically get it. This needs to be done on a harness. That would be my suggestion, is you want this exercise done on a harness, not on a flat collar around their neck or any other collar that goes around their neck. You want it on a harness in case they do pull to and dig and drag to get to that piece of food. So the same rule, the same guidelines apply here. The rewardable behaviors are: the dog is looking but not pursuing, not pulling forward, not trying to grab it. That's a leave it. In effect, that's a leave it. The dog looks at the piece of kibble and then they look away, look anywhere but at that thing. That is also a leave it. Anything other than dashing forward to grab it, is a leave it. Okay, so you take what you can get. But that's what I have to do a lot of the time in public is I will just let them, like, I'll hold, if they apply all the tension, like, and if they apply all the tension where they run out of slack, like they've got no more leash left, I let them just maintain that until they essentially give up, until they like look somewhere else, and then I capitalize upon that. I capture it and say, leave it, good leave it, there you go. So you can toss toss them a piece of food elsewhere, or you can deliver it directly to their mouth. If you want to start testing this, and you're working with safe leave it items, then I like to do I like to offer a touch target. So the dog has to move around the kibble or the pile of kibble that I'm putting on the ground. And so I'm asking them to do a touch target with their nose, and they basically have to ignore the food on the ground, which can be really challenging. So you want to be ready, once again, if you're working with a dog who's not a known resource guarder, who's not a suspected resource guarder, you got to be ready to, once again, mitigate if they try to go for that food that's on the floor. The more food that's there, the more tempting it's going to be. But you can start with a treat lure first, but I like to get it to the point where I can invite my dog around the kibble or even over the kibble in asking for a touch target. And when they do that, then I'll give them something that's even better than what's on the ground, okay? Or a jackpot, like boom, 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 shade feeding. But that's a good test, I find, is to try to get them to go around the kibble or even step over the kibble on the ground in order to do a touch target, or you can do a treat lure if you need to work up to the touch target. Okay, so that's quite enough rambling. Hopefully that's helpful. As usual, if you made it through somehow, some way, I appreciate you watching. Thanks. Let's do the wave.